All right, what's going on, guys? This is Rob, and we are wrapping up the Thor story arc by Donny Cates. That's correct. Thor number 6, The Devouring King. Devourer King, I think is actually what it's called. But what this does is a lot of you guys probably know, Thor faced off against the Black Winter, right? And the Black Winter was basically revealed to have been this being that essentially gave Galactus his power, right? That in effect, Galactus was a herald of the Black Winter, and that Galactus had recruited Thor in order to help Galactus bolster his power so he could defeat the Black Winter, and it was essentially just a great big huge ruse. That the reality of this was that Galactus was trying to escape his subservience, right? He was trying to escape his role as being the herald of the Black Winter, and then just kind of pawning it off on Thor as the Black Winter wants to destroy everything, right? So Galactus more or less lied. And when Thor had realized that Thor had basically started facing off against the Black Winter and seemingly Galactus at the same time, right? Now, what this does is it initially opens up after the conflict, right? And what it really shows us is the appearance of the Silver Surfer, right? The Silver Surfer shows up to Thor and basically says, hey, look, man, like, this seems like it's been a pretty crazy situation. And Thor's like, yeah, you know, it's been pretty wild, right? Thor's drunk, he's exhausted, right? It was a hugely tiring set of events, right? Something that has drained Thor immensely. But it's not necessarily the conflict that drained Thor, it's what comes next that has made him so tired, right? That has basically revealed to him the error of his ways, the price to be paid for destroying the Black Winter. When Silver Surfer asks Thor, what did you see when you looked into the Black Winter? Thor initially shuts him down, right? He turns him down and says, no, I'm not gonna tell you, right? I'm not telling anybody what I saw. And the response to Silver Surfer is actually really cool here. His whole stance is, all right, look, man, here's the thing. If you keep this kind of thing to yourself, it's not going to help anybody, right? Like, I've been where you are. I've seen what you've seen. It's not going to help anyone here. So keep it to yourself if you feel like you must, but it's going to cause you problems later on down the road. And so the result of this is that Thor ultimately ends up opening up, right? And what we end up doing is jumping back to the conflict at hand, right? And really Galactus responding to the declaration of the Black Winter that Galactus is actually the herald of the Black Winter himself, right? That Galactus is owed a debt. And ultimately, or at least the Black Winter is owed a debt, you know, by Galactus. And so ultimately you end up kind of having Thor who sort of calls a bit of a ceasefire here, right? And where the Black Winter is almost a little bit distracted or sort of going back into its normal form, you know, Galactus initially calls on Thor to say, hey man, like, while the Black Winter is distracted, we should destroy him. And the response of Thor is, no, you're not doing anything, right? Like, you stay down, because what you've done is you've tricked me, you've lied to me, you've helped me take you to these different worlds and destroy the denizens on them so you could consume the world's energies. Billions of people died in order for you to maintain a lie, right? And so in response to that, Thor attacks Galactus. Now, one of the big questions that I hear from a lot of fans is they ask, if Galactus gives a person a portion of the power cosmic, say for example, Silver Surfer, if Galactus gives the Silver Surfer a portion of the power cosmic, and then Galactus, you know, Silver Surfer turns on Galactus, why doesn't Galactus just take that portion of the power cosmic away? And we don't really know, right? We're never really given an explanation as to why that's the case, why Galactus doesn't just take that portion of the power cosmic and then just give it to somebody else. We're never really given a definitive explanation. We can kind of assume that the character's already there and Marvel wants to tell stories about them, so they just keep their power cosmic so Marvel can go forward accordingly. With the Silver Surfer, this is especially so, because nobody cares about Norrin Radd, but everybody cares about when he's the Silver Surfer, right? Everybody cares about those stories, so it kind of makes sense. But what Donny Cates does is take the entire situation and flip it on its head, right? Where normally we would expect Galactus to take a portion of the power cosmic away from Thor, that what Thor actually does is in turn take the power cosmic away from Galactus. He literally absorbs it, and it makes sense, right? Once you sit down and think about it, it actually makes sense, right? That the power cosmic isn't really, it's not as though, you know, Galactus gives a portion of the power cosmic to Thor with rules in place, right? There's no real checks here. It's not like, you know, here's your portion of the power cosmic and all you can do with this are these few things. This is Donny Cates hitting on the old school Silver Surfer, because back in the day when Silver Surfer first got the power cosmic, he could do things like time travel. There was no real limit to what it was that he could do. He had all kinds of powers because the power cosmic wasn't really well defined. It was basically just this kind of source of power that was out there that seemingly only Galactus could tap into. But what this means is that that if Galactus can give the power cosmic to somebody else, and Donny Cates is hitting on the old school Silver Surfer comics, then it means somebody else can take the power cosmic away from Galactus. It becomes a two-way street, right? That's what Galactus did. He opened this door, and Thor is fully utilizing it, right? And so he basically drains the power cosmic off of Galactus, and literally says, like, for all the worlds that you've killed, for all the innocent lives that have died because of you, I sentence you to death. And ultimately, basically just like attacks Galactus and leaves him in this wildly weakened state. This is kind of nuts, right? Like, this really isn't something that we've seen. Now, one of the big issues that I have with this is not really with Donny Cates, but the fact that this is something that kind of goes as sort of a, okay, because in more recent years, and I don't like what Marvel's been doing, in more recent years, Marvel's kind of turned Galactus into Marvel's whipping boy, right? That's really what they've done. That in a lot of ways, back in the day, back in like the 80s and kind of in the 90s to a degree, that what you saw was Galactus was like this force of nature, right? When Galactus showed up, it meant things were about to pop off. And even though you were only reading a comic, it was still something that kind of shook you a little bit. Like, damn, Galactus is here, man. Like, dude, this is a big deal. But in more recent years, Galactus, I think, has in a lot of ways been so overexposed and been defeated by so many characters that he doesn't really maintain the kind of, the kind of presence that he used to, right? This kind of intimidating aspect. When he shows up in the comics, it's like, damn, Galactus. Now it's just kind of like, okay, cool, Galactus. And I think that's kind of a problem, right? I think that's kind of an issue. And so had Marvel not done that in recent years, this would have been a massive moment, right? It would be huge. And in a lot of ways, it still is. But because of what's happened over the years in Marvel Comics, a lot of us who are reading Marvel are kind of looking at this like, oh God, okay, so Galactus gets destroyed by somebody else now. Like, that's kind of how we see it. And it's really sort of a shame, right? It's really sort of disappointing to see Galactus treated in such a way, right? This is kind of fearful, intimidating, universal thing where like races across the cosmos shake in their boots at the very coming of Galactus, right? The coming of Galactus means the coming of death. But in more recent years, it's like the coming of Galactus means like he's probably going to get destroyed. That's kind of what it means more recently in comics. But with Thor basically defeating Galactus, then ultimately what you end up having is Galactus 1 telling him, you have no idea what you've done, right? You have no idea what you set in motion here. And then 2, the Black Winter actually thanks Galactus and says, I appreciate what you've done. I'm going to take his body and then I'm going to head back. And Thor's response is, no, you're not doing anything, right? Galactus basically stays here. Galactus now serves me, right? I will revitalize him or whatever it is that I feel like doing with him, but Galactus will now serve me. And the response to the Black Winter is, what could Galactus possibly do for you, right? Like, I mean, he's basically an emaciated, dead version of himself, right? Like, Galactus is not who Galactus used to be. Is he going to serve you as like a slave? Like, what's the whole point here? And the response of Thor is, he's going to serve me as a bomb, right? He's going to be used by me as a bomb. And what this leads to is it leads to Thor basically taking the power cosmic within himself and the power cosmic within Galactus and basically just setting it all off in what is more or less a giant explosion, right? This huge explosion of energy, which totally obliterates the Black Winter, right? Destroys him all the way down to like what is more or less just a singular snowflake. And then it sort of speaks to Thor for a second. Before Thor completely and totally eradicates it, it speaks to Thor and it asks the question, do you want to see how you die, right? That's the one thing that we haven't found out about Thor yet from the Black Winter, right? The Black Winter shows you how you die, and it asks Thor, do you want to see how you die? And Thor says, yes. And before we actually find out what that is, we switch back to Asgard. And we end up finding out the helmet of Galactus is actually being used as kind of a piece of the world tree, right? It's almost kind of like a sort of trophy for Thor, right? Like, look what I did here, right? Like, I single-handedly managed to destroy Galactus, which is kind of a big deal. And it's a pretty cool little thing. But what it does is it basically has Thor have a conversation with Norrin Radd. And Thor's conversation here is such that when Norrin Radd, kind of continues his line of questioning and says, what did you see? It kind of picks up at the moment right before we switched over to the battle between Thor and Galactus, that the ending Thor saw, that what he saw was basically death, right? He saw darkness. Now, the form this darkness takes is Thanos wielding the hammer of Thor that's also basically covered in the Infinity Stones. So it looks like Thanos finds some way to take the Infinity Stones and merge them with Thor's hammer, and then what this looks like in the background, I'm not gonna lie, this looks like Marvel Zombies, right? This is exactly what it looks like. It looks like Marvel Zombies. And it kind of makes sense. If Thanos is obsessed with death, then who better to lead the Marvel Zombies than Thanos? And maybe that's the reason why Marvel Zombies Resurrection had been postponed so much, is because once this Marvel Resurrection came, or this Zombies Resurrection came out, and Marvel was like, hey, like, we've kind of got a big hit, like, people want to see Marvel Zombies come back, then it was like, okay, let's make an event around it. And I'll be honest with you guys, zombies have kind of been a dead genre for like a decade, right? But it is cool to see like Thanos with an Infinity Gem lined Thor's hammer leading an army of the dead, right? That sounds amazing. And seemingly Thor realizes this is all his fault. But with that being said, guys, we're gonna bring this video to an end. If you are new here to Comics Explained, make sure you guys hit the sub button to become part of the Rob Corps. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure you drop a like, and I will catch you all later. Peace.